one of the most popular comic book franchises. It's about a team of mutants led by Professor Charles Xavier, who use their mutant powers to protect humanity, even if the humans don't necessarily care for them. X-Men's core story, about people who are hated just because they're different, has helped X-Men expand beyond comics onto TV shows, movies, and of course, video games.
That's right, bub. In the early 90s, X-Men gained mass popularity with the Saturday morning cartoon show on Fox. Us kids would have bought anything X-Men. X-Men action figures, X-Men trading cards, X-Men socks, and of course, X-Men video games for the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. Both games were inspired by the cartoon show. Which one was better? Let's play some console wars and find out. Alright, let's get started. Wait a minute. You have 2 X-Men games for Sega.
Well, yeah, but we'll just do X-Men 2, Clone Wars.
What? That's not right. Since Nintendo only has 1 game, you should do the first one.
No, you should, We should play X-Men 2.
We should play X-Men 2. Whoa, dude. Did you just control my mind via Professor X mutant power?
Yeah. I guess I got mutant powers for this episode.
Cool. Hey, maybe I have powers too.
Is it working? You've adamantium claws like Wolverine?
No claws came out. Something came out. Long story short, I need to borrow some underwear.
If you want some good looking characters, look no further than the Sega game.
Characters look like they did in the comics or the cartoon. Character animation looks smooth and fluid. There's good level variety, with levels based on locations from the franchise. There's even the occasional 3D effect, pushing 16 bits to the limit. Look at that. Sega always has some sweet, smooth balls.
Dude, again?
What?
Let's take a look at the Super Nintendo graphics. Talk about characters that resemble the cartoon show. And look how jacked everyone is. I wouldn't want to mess with these guys. Character animations are smooth too. There's different levels based on the franchise here as well. There's no 3D effects, but people don't buy games because of some 3D balls. They buy it based on how the characters look, and they definitely look better on Nintendo. First of all, characters are much larger on Nintendo. I can barely see any of those tiny Sega characters. Also, Nintendo has more detail. Some of the Sega characters don't even have faces.
At least the Sega characters have proportional bodies. Super Nintendo characters look ridiculous with those big muscles and tiny little heads.
They're just jealous because Sega characters look like they haven't had a decent meal in days. Characters are bigger and better on Nintendo. Graphics gotta go to Super Nintendo.
Oh, do they?
Yep.
Best graphics should go to Sega. You're no fun.
The good graphics of the Super Nintendo are also shown during the cutscenes. Look at these pictures. Looks just like the cartoon show. And Professor X gives a nice narration of what the story is, tying all the events in the game together.
That Professor X sure can talk, though. I'd make fun of him. But I can't.
Because
that's all the Sega cutscene is.
It's just Professor X talking to the Cerebro computer. No pictures at all. Just text. Lots of text.
that's so much text. It's like a graphic novel without the graphic part. What's that called again? Oh yeah, a novel. The Sega cutscenes are like a novel. Even Nintendo's character select screen looks bigger, brighter, and more detailed. Sega's character select screen looks dark, poorly drawn, and just sad. This one was too easy. Best presentation goes to Nintendo.
So, does Nintendo have music from the cartoon?
Nope.
What's that? No music from the cartoon, you say? Oh man! Why did you even show up for this category? I mean, how do you possibly expect to win? Because Sega doesn't have any music either.
What? Here I am thinking Sega had music from the cartoon. I'll teach you to mess with me. Optic Blast!
Are you still trying to see if you have powers too?
Yeah. I really thought I had Cyclops' Optic Blast there for a minute.
So, music.
The music from Sega may not be from the cartoon, but it's this pretty cool fusion of electronic and metal. It works really well with the game. There's some pretty catchy tunes here.
Yeah, well, Super Nintendo has some good old video game music that doesn't have to be a fusion of anything to be good. Some music sounds intense and action-packed. Other music is downplayed and sets a calm tone. Sega recycles music from earlier stages. Lazy! Also, some stages don't even have music. Snore!
While there might be a stage or two with no music, or some themes may repeat, what music there is memorable and not boring. Listening to Super Nintendo can be boring. It's very typical or cliche. You feel like you've heard it somewhere before. I mean, I could see this being leftovers from a Mega Man X game. Sega tries something different, making the music more memorable in the long run. Sega's clearly got the better music.
Well, Sega has some pretty lame sound effects. Listen to these lasers that sound like farts.
Well, Super Nintendo has lame sound effects. I mean, listen to this. It sounds more like a bird than an attack.
I can't hear you over more fart sounds from Sega.
Well, Super Nintendo has fart sounds too. That doesn't sound like teleporting to me. So both games have odd sound effects. But Sega's music is better. Best sound's gots to go to Sega.
X-Men for the Super Nintendo plays like a fighting game. Since this game was made by Capcom, it plays like another one of its beloved franchises, Street Fighter. In order to use your mutant powers, simply put in a move like Street Fighter. There's even stages that look like a straight-up fighter.
Well, Sega's a straight beat-em-up game.
It's full of action with elements of platforming. Sega realized players wouldn't want to enter Morse code in order to use mutant powers. A push of a button is all it takes to use mutant powers in Sega.
Yeah? Well, I find by entering the Morse code, as you say, the player has more variety of moves, and it keeps the gameplay interesting. Especially since the Sega game is so long, I think you would want some more variety to keep you going.
What? Since when is pushing a button not fun? I could do this all day. Ow! What'd you do that for?
Fell asleep playing the boring Sega game. I had to wake you up.
Wait, did you throw cards at me thinking maybe you had Gambit's powers and the cards might blow up?
Kind of.
Wow, that's a lot worse than you just throwing cards at me. I mean, I could have blown up.
Well, I didn't say it's a perfect plan. My point is proven. The Sega game is too long.
Well, at least it's not as difficult as the Super Nintendo game. You gotta learn all these moves, and then you gotta beat this game, which is ridiculously difficult. The game is so difficult, it needs a password system, cause you're gonna die. A lot.
Difficult? Sega's difficult. Since you don't have a password system, you gotta get through the whole game in one sitting, which you just proved impossible. The gameplay never really changes. Sometimes you go left, sometimes you go right, sometimes up, and sometimes down. It goes on and on and on. Will you wake up?
Dude!
What? You have two powers now? First Professor X and now Magneto? Your glass of beer won't come up to you. Magneto, remember, he can only move metal.
Steel Reserve. Anyways, if your game's so good, why won't you let me play too?
Yeah, that's 'cause it's only one player.
One player? I thought it was X-Men, not X-Man.
Sega's got 2 players, no problem.
Well, maybe Nintendo didn't make a two-player game because they saw how bad it was on Sega. Look at this! Stages where you can fall are a nightmare on two-player. Running along. Whoops, you fell. Now I fell, because the screen wouldn't move. It happens again and again. It gives me a headache. Will you wake up? With more variation and less of the headache. Gameplay goes to Nintendo. X-Men. 2 very different games for different consoles. Each good in their own right, but one's gotta be better, and that's the Super Nintendo. The game looks better. The story is told better. The music and sound may not be great, but it's still good. Gameplay isn't as easy as a Sega game at first, but it adds depth and gives a better playing experience in the long run. I don't think there's any dispute. Best X-Men game goes to... Wait a minute. I feel it. Something's happening. I'm getting a power.
Fireworks, that's cool. It could be worse. You could have the blob's fat power.
Of course. Hundreds of mutant powers and I get jubilees. Best game goes to Nintendo.